Dr. Iyad Zahalka is a rare combination of a practicing Shari Qadi and an academic scholar. He is presently the Qadi of the Jerusalem Sharia Court and the former director of the Sharia courts in Israel, and a lecturer on Muslim family law in modern times in Tel-Aviv University and in the Hebrew University. His main field of interests are application of Islamic family law in Shari judiciary and the challenges facing Islamic law in Israel. His dissertation on Fiqh al-aqalliyyat was recently approved by the Senate of the Hebrew University, and he deserves our congratulations. He is also a graduate of the Faculty of Law of Tel-Aviv University. He published several books on the Sharia law, and the Sharia courts, and the Sharia in modern times in Hebrew. Dr. Zahalka's paper is entitled Views of Muslim Minorities of Fiqh al-aqalliyyat. It distinguishes between the role of fiqh as a theology anchored in legal methodology of the classical Sharia and the role of fiqh al-aqalliyyat as a mechanism for accommodating the Sharia to specific circumstances of Muslim in any given place and time. He discusses its real chances to succeed in the light of opposition of the part of the Salafi stream and the attitude of non-Muslim
Thank you, Professor Layish. I hope you enjoy the time, because it's time of siesta now. So I hope I'm not disturbing you in the time of the siesta in my speech. In fact, when we are talking about Muslim minority jurisprudence, we are talking about different approaches toward the rules, the Sharia, and different way to apply the Sharia in the different situations. When I was in my traveling through United Kingdom and Europe and United States, I found that there are different Muslim minority jurisprudence. There are, if you, for example, ask the Muslims from India or Pakistan, what do you think about Muslim minority jurisprudence? They will say for you that we have it. The Deoband movement, in fact, related to this situation of minorities, we know that there are a big Muslim minority in India. So we develop a Muslim minority jurisprudence for the minority, for the Muslim minority in India. So we have it. We don't need any new way of thinking about how to apply the Sharia for the Muslim minorities. We have it. It was developed since years ago. It is not something new that Qardawi or Alwani or others discover or renew. And they say the rules for the Muslim minorities should be related to the classical Sharia and should be committed to the Sharia itself. And we can understand the Sharia through the situation that we live, but doesn't mean that we should have new rules or should derive a new approach in the Sharia. They said that the Deoband movement, it is a reform movement, and it is taking in consideration the situation, but it is still related to the classical school according to the Hanafi madhab, which is widely spread in the Indian and Pakistan countries. So they say that it is nothing new. While if you are talking to other Muslims, that they are not coming from the Indian India or Pakistan or these countries in South of Asia, they will say for you that we should derive a new rules in order to make harmony between our life in the Western countries, because we have a situation, we have a new situation that we don't find in the Islamic countries, and we should make harmony between this situation and our faith, our Islamic faith, and how to be good Muslim, a committed Muslim to the religion, and to apply and to do all the duties of Islam in that specific situation. So they think that we should have a new approach toward the application of Sharia in the West. Now here we find different streams, as Uriya said. We can find Muslims that belong to the Salafi stream, that they are committed to the rules of the Sharia, and they have their specific Muslim minority jurisprudence, which means that we as Muslims should keep the rules of Islam even in the non-Muslim countries in the West, but we should have new rules how to keep our identity as Muslims. It means to make small communities for the Muslims, to establish or to build schools for our children, to have our institutes to serve our children, to serve us as Muslims, to be different than the others that they are not Muslims, and to show the others that we as Muslims can be committed to our religion and to do all our duties. In this way, they will find Islam as a religion that could suit everywhere and could be good for the humanity everywhere. And while we were in our travel in Bradford in Britain, we saw that really the Muslims, they believe that by keep the rules of Islam and do all the duties of Islam, and to be unique by their dress, by their behaviors, by their identity, together, solidarity between the Muslims, that they could be good examples for the others and could have Islamic life and establish Islamic life in their communities in the West. So they also claim, the Salafis, that they have their own Muslim minority jurisprudence, but it doesn't mean that Muslim minority jurisprudence should be based on renew the Sharia. The opposite. It should be based on keeping the Sharia as it is, because just by this way we can keep the Islam, we can keep our Islamic identity, and we can face all the challenges that we have in the West. When you ask them, tell me, what do you think about the example that Uriya talked about it, which is the mortgage? And they said, why we should have our own home if I can rent an apartment for my family? Why I should broke the rules of the Islam in order to have home for myself, while I can rent a apartment for my family. It is not necessary for me. I can live good life by renting an apartment, and it is okay for me. It is not necessary it is not something that I can continue my life without it. So I can do it. And they believe that it is the true. And they believe that they can live good life in the Western countries, in non-Muslim states, and to be establishing the Islamic life in their life. Now, we have other group, which is I can say the regular Muslims, who they are committed to the religion, but they are open to all the new situation of living in non-Muslim states. These regular Muslims, they know that they should practice the Islam in their life, and they should do all the duties of Islam, and they should keep the Islamic identity, and should raise their children according to the Sharia and to the Islamic manners. But also they understand that they are living in different environment, different situation, that it is in the Islamic countries. And therefore, they should make efforts in order to suit the rules of the Sharia to the specific situation, the unique situation that they live. And therefore, they are asking a lot, the scholars, how we can deal with this challenge that we face in the non-Muslim states. What we should do in our normal life, in working together with non-Muslims, in have friends, in activities in the community, activities in the public, how we can establish our citizenship as Americans or as British or as any other people in the West. Should we be involved in public activities? Should we involve in politics, in the economic life? Do these issues important to us as Muslim and we should be involved in it? Or we should do such as the Salafis and be outside of the public life? And now, I think that these regulars, I say regulars because they are living their life normally as such as everyone. You may not know that he is Muslim or not. He can go with you to the cinema. He can work with you in the company. He can be side by side with you in the bus, and you can't make a difference between any others and these Muslim people. And these regulars, they are really interested in being active in the life of the state, to the public, and also to be committed to the religion. And they start asking the scholars what to do. The scholars, when they face these kind of questions, they started of developing a new doctrine, a new perception of application of the Sharia in the non-Muslim countries. I don't agree with Uriya and other Orientalist scholars that the purpose of developing the Muslim minority jurisprudence of the mainstream of Islam, of the middle stream of Islam, is in order to spread the Islam, to make da'wah, to call people to be Muslims. I don't agree with that. I think that the purpose of developing the Muslim minority jurisprudence of the middle stream, for the mainstream of Islam, is in order to solve the problems and the challenge of living as Muslim in non-Muslim state. In order to make the life of the Muslims in non-Muslim states easier, and could be everyone able to be Muslim, to be committed to the religion, to practice the Islam in his private life, and also to be active part of the public. I think that the da'wah is byproduct of this process. It is a byproduct. I agree that in the fatwa, in the decisions of the European Council, the interpretation or the objective of da'wah appears in this decision and appears in the fatwa of the Muslim scholars of the middle stream. But it is just to justify their fatwa, their idea, and to make their idea or their decision based on basis of the Islam, of the Sharia, but it is not the main purpose of these decisions or this fatwa. It is byproduct. The main issue is really, in fact, is how to live as Muslim, as committed Muslim to the religion, in that different place, different environment, in this different situation. So, and I don't agree that it is that this Muslim minority, it is only for the middle stream, the wasatis, because Alwani consider himself as something different. He says that I'm not belonging to the wasati stream. He says it clear. And I think that the people who follow Alwani, especially in the American, the Muslims in America, who are following the Triple IT, the International Muslim Intelligence Center in Virginia, they are looking for reformer scholars, a reform approach in Islam, and they think that Qaradawi is not doing well by his ideas, because he is trying to connect the classical Sharia with the new life, which is not necessary in as they think in this situation. Which is necessary is to try to derive a new rules based on the principles of the Quran, and establish a new vision, a new Sharia based on the basics of the Quran that we have in the Quran. There are a strong debate between these sides who really belong to the same idea of establishing a new Muslim minority jurisprudence for the minorities, which is different than the one of the Salafis and different of the one of the Indians and Pakistans that they belong to the Deoband movement. So I think that to frame this this doctrine as it is as a doctrine of the wasati only, and that comes to spread the Islam, we could make a mistake of understanding this doctrine. I think that the Muslims, and I want to be clear, that accept and adopt this approach, they believe that they are doing well. They are establishing, they are practicing the Islam, the true Islam. And they even do the Islam better than the Salafi do it. Why? Because they follow the Quran, and they follow the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they follow the Muslim scholars in the ancient days. But they use the mechanism that the Sharia supply and offer for them in order to apply the Sharia in the different situation and the different challenge that they face in their life. So they don't believe that the Salafi is more Muslim than them. The opposite. They think that they live the Islamic life as they should be, by using this mechanism of the Sharia in order to suit the rules of the Sharia to their situation. But in fact, if we should look to the Muslim minorities in the West, we will know that we know that they are not the same. They are not the same. They come from different origins. They come from different states, different nations, different languages, different madhab, schools, and different perception. And they have a lot of differences between them. Therefore, it is a big challenge to make unity between Muslims in the West. Therefore, we can find liberal Muslims, we can find Salafis, we can find Wasati Muslims, we can find regular Muslims, we can find Muslims that they don't belong to any one of them. And we can also find Muslims that the religion is not something important for them. It is just a cultural point of view only. Religion is not something important for them. They're free of religion. We can find all these kinds of Muslims. So if you can come to one who is not committed to the religion, which is Islam only a cultural point of view for him, he will say for you, it doesn't mind me. Muslim minority jurisprudence for the West stream, for the Salafi stream, for the Deoband stream, it doesn't mind me. I will live my life as it is, and Islam should be something that I can refer to it in the festivals, in the occasions, different occasions only. It is not something that is important in my life. It doesn't direct me in my life. So it doesn't mind what is going by Muslim minority jurisprudence, doesn't mind him. And this is not a small minority. This is a lot of the Muslims is thinking like that. You can find also Muslims that they are committed to Islam, but they will say for you, I'm doing all the duties of Islam, I'm practicing the Islam in my life, but in the public life, I follow the laws of the country. And for me, as a religious man, religious Muslim man, to follow the laws of the country, it is the important for me. I could not go against the laws of the country. And I can't create a new life. This is the life that I live, that's all. And find imams in the United States that they are believing that they should be like that. There are also Muslims that they don't belong to any political Islamic approach. They are not part of the Wasati stream, and they think that they should make a reform in the rules of Islam to have a new vision about Islam in the modern times. And they will say for you, I can use the Muslim minority jurisprudence as something that I could have a sense what to do as a Muslim. But I'm not committed to this doctrine. I'm not committed to these rules and to this approach. And I just, it is interesting for me to know that there is something like that, and it's okay for me. And where I can use it, where can I have a benefit of this doctrine, it should be okay for me. So it is interesting for them to know that there is, or to have an idea about what's going in the Muslim minority jurisprudence, but only just to have a new way to think about how to practice the Islam and to keep the Islamic identity, and they are not committed, in fact, to that doctrine or to that approach. We can find also Muslims that they are committed to the Wasat stream. They are part of the Islamic approach of the Wasatiyya, and they are close to the Islamic Brotherhood, the Islamic Brotherhood movement. And they really follow the doctrine, and they are asking for fatwas. They are interested in what's going in order to know what is the rules that this doctrine have in every field of life, that they can follow it. And also we have, as we said before, the Salafis and the I can say the other Salafis. When we are talking about Salafis, it is something not known exactly what does it mean, because Salafis, we can connect it with the Wahhabis, with the Wahhabim, and we can connect with the Salafis that they are not Wahhabi, but they have their madhab and their religious perception, and they follow the Islam as it was, but by different way than the Wahhabis. Especially when we are talking about Muslims that they come from the Indian countries. In fact, if you just make interview with different Muslim activists in the West, you can find that there's a lot of problems facing the Muslim minority jurisprudence. That it is not something familiar, it is not something common, and something that was widely spread between the Muslims in the West. I was surprised to find that activists, popular or known activists, Muslim activists, that they don't know what does it mean, Muslim minority jurisprudence of the West Stream, or they don't know it. In Birmingham, there is a Qadi woman. She is sitting in the Sharia Council of Birmingham, and when I ask her, when I make an interview with her for my research in the PhD, what do you know about Muslim minority jurisprudence? And if she follow this doctrine or this approach, she told me that she don't know nothing about it. She doesn't know anything about Muslim minority jurisprudence. I said, how? You are living here in Britain, and in Britain there were the offices, the main offices of the European Council for fatwa, for research and fatwa, and how you didn't know about it? It was surprised me, because I am that overseas, I know about it, and you are sitting here and you don't know about it. She told me, in fact, there is nothing happened that could let me know that there is a new approach developed by Muslim scholars in the Wasat stream. And she is sitting as a Qadi in the Sharia Council of Birmingham. So another one that I interview, he is an activist in the Conservative Party of Britain, and I told him if he knows something about the Muslim minority jurisprudence, and he said to me that he doesn't know anything about it, and he is a non-activist. So, but what is common for these activists? The common is that their mother language is not Arabic, and most of the publishings of the Muslim European of research on fatwa, it is in Arabic, and they are talking to the Arabs more than they are talking to the others. So the language is a barrier between spreading the Muslim minority jurisprudence and the Muslims that their original language is not Arabic. So I start to find that it is there is two levels of Muslim minority jurisprudence. One level is a theoretical level, which is something deeply based on the Islamic basis and principles, and the level of the people in the West, that they don't know what's going in this doctrine or this approach, or these people who's working on it. So maybe it could become a doctrine for thinkers, for scholars who are debating one with the other, or it is something that it is a public movement for the people themselves. And I find really that the spreading of the Muslim jurisprudence is something limited, and it's something that is not common in the Muslim minorities in the West. Other problem that this stream or this approach faced in the Western countries is that the Muslim leaders and the Muslim institutes and the mosques they are led by imams that they belong to the Salafi or to the conservative side or movements in the Islamic community, and they are supported by the Kingdom of Arab Saudi. Most of the books that I find in the libraries of the Muslim Islamic centers and the mosques, they were donated by the Saudi Arabia. So all of these activities, which was supported by the Wahhabis and the Saudi Arabia, is not going side by side with the approach of the Wasatis. So these leaders, who is more close to the Wahhabis than to the others, are standing against spreading the Wasati approach of Muslim minority jurisprudence. I think that the situation in the West is not really clear for everyone. It is more complicated than.
5 minutes.
Okay. It is more complicated than we just think. I think that the situation in the West of the Muslim minorities is still going, is still not clear who's the strongest stream, who is leading the Islamic approach in the West, and I think that the groups of the groups of the Islamic movements of the Indian countries still stronger than the movements of the Islamics that of the Islamic movement that they come from the Middle East. These differences up to now still exist. I think that some say that the differences is going to be between the Muslims that they come from the Middle East and the Muslims that they come from Turkey and the Muslims that come from the Indian countries. The differences between them could be less than now because they have mixed marriage, because they have common activities in the Islamic centers, and they are developing a Muslim community which is doesn't based on the past, while it is looking forward the future. I think that up to now we still have these differences, and these differences still being a barrier between developing a united approach in the Muslims in the Muslims communities in the West. And I think that these differences still being barrier between the theoretical ideology of Muslim minorities and the public level.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and please raise your hand. And someone, you need a microphone in order to pose the questions. Please. Tell Bhakasha.
going to sit near Uriya in order to be more close to him. But if he's saying something.
It's a question to either of the speakers, if you can elaborate about the Fiqh al-aqalliyyat in Israel, regarding the Muslims in Israel. To either of the speakers. Sorry. We're sitting here.
Again, the question.
You didn't hear me?
No.
Third time.
I'm busy sitting.
Yeah. Again, my question is to either of the two speakers, if you can elaborate about the Fiqh al-aqalliyyat to Arabs in Israel, Muslims.
I think Iyad has, yes.
I'm not sure it's open.
Is it open?
Yes.
Okay, but I will speak voice. I think Iyad is more qualified to answer this, but I will tell you one thing. Technically, if we just focus on the wasati approach, technically Muslims living in Israel are entitled to be considered part of the groups that the wasati approach relates to. They are a Muslim minority within a non-Muslim majority society, and therefore, according to the approach. But wasatis, Karadawi and his fellows, they make a point of stating that Fiqh al-aqalliyyat al-muslima does not apply to Arab Israelis. That Arab Israelis are the exception. And why? There is a political aspect to this. If Arab Israelis are a Muslim minority, if they are something the like of Turks in Germany or Pakistanis in Britain, that implies what? Accepting the existence of Israel as a legitimate state. I actually remember very vividly, I'm sure you do as well, when we sat with Shah Halawa, San Halawa, the Secretary General of the Council. I remember Iyad asked him, does Fiqh al-aqalliyyat, can Fiqh al-aqalliyyat al-muslima be applied, the wasati approach, be applied to Arabs in Israel? I think that was almost a historic moment, because if he said yes, it would have had quite a number of implications. So Iyad asked the question, but Shah Halawa looked at me, and he said, no. And he asked, how many years did the English rule here? We were sitting in Dublin. And he answered, I don't know, he answered, 800. Then he looked at Iyad, he said, you will wait. To answer your question?
Yeah, I want to add that it is there are a difference between the Muslims in Israel and the Muslims in the West, especially in the western of Europe and the United States. We are, the Muslims here, we are originals. We are a different nation than the Israelis, than the Jews. So these differences, that we are different nation, we are originals here, we didn't immigrate to Israel, we are part of the land since hundreds of years, if not thousands. So we think that it should be different between Muslims that immigrate to other country, that they are supposed to accept the norms, the laws of that country, than Muslims that they are originals in their country, and that they should keep their different identity, different approach, or than the others in the same country.
But Iyad, from a strict theoretical point of view, the fiqh is about the weakness, that you as a minority are in a state of weakness. So it shouldn't have made a difference if you are 20% or natives or non-natives.
No. Now the Muslims in Israel, they were debating where the Muslim minority jurisprudence of the Wasat stream is suitable for us or not, available for us or not. And the answer was different. The There are some who say that doesn't suit us at all because we are living in our country, we are originals, we are a different nation, we should keep our religion, we should do it as it is. And there are some that accept that we should change or renew the rules of Sharia, that it should suit our specific situation as a minority in Israel. So there are different approaches in the Muslims in Israel toward this question. And I think that we should, my point of view is we should use the Muslim minority jurisprudence in order to find for ourselves what suits our specific situation as Muslims, as originals in Israel, and how we can improve our situation by using the principles of the Muslim minority jurisprudence. And this is what's really going. I think I just wrote an article that I'm believing that we are developing a unique fiqh for the Muslims in Israel, which is different than the fiqh which was developed in the Muslim Islamic countries, and different than the fiqh which is based on the Muslim minority jurisprudence.
But if I can add just one very brief point, because it has to do with the sociology of all of this. As you noticed, Arab Israelis do not live in tents, meaning that most of them went to a bank, which is not an Islamic bank, and took a mortgage. So you remember we discussed this question. And if Fiqh al-aqalliyyat doesn't apply, and if most of them are not Hanafis, that is, the Shafi'is, which means they don't consider necessarily this is Dalkha. However, did they allow themselves to do that? And actually, Iyad is the one who answered me that. They just did. Yes. Because life and the realities of life are stronger than waiting for someone to give you the okay.
But they didn't justify it by the methodology of or the perception of the Muslim minority jurisprudence.
Of course, but that's the exact point. They didn't wait for Qaradawi to tell them it's okay to do.
Ella, please.
No, it's the same question. That's fine.
You are satisfied, fully satisfied.
I would like to ask Dr. Zahalka a question. You said that the real purpose of the Fiqh al-aqalliyyat is not the da'wah. But you also said that these people in the council, they explicitly mentioned that this is the purpose. And of course, if you look in the Fatawa of Kibar al-Ulama, there are such books, you will find such expressions. Now, how would you justify the idea that you don't believe what these people say? You see, if I may quote a story from early Islam about the methodology of finding out what someone really thinks. There is a very famous story that a Muslim was fighting a mushrik, and when he was about to strike him with the sword, the mushrik said, La ilaha illallah. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, the Muslim continued the fight and struck him. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There was a fight between a Muslim and a polytheist, and when the Muslim was about to strike the polytheist with the sword, the polytheist said, there is no God except Allah. So, strictly speaking, the gentleman should have stopped the fight because the man embraced Islam, but he didn't.
He said it only once, that's the problem.
Pardon?
No, I'm kidding.
And he went on and he killed the man, and then he felt some compunctions and he wasn't very happy, and he spoke to the Prophet about it, and the Prophet said, Hal shaqaqta an qalbihi, did you open his heart to see what he really meant? Now, what is the lesson from the story, that human beings do not have a real ability to find out, what other people think, except but they do hear what other people say.
Yeah.
نحكم بظواهر الأمور. We, in this world, we have to act according to the apparent situation.
I want to tell you, I want to ask you, the example that Uriya just mentioned about the mortgage. The mortgage. Mortgage. How does it connected with spreading Islam, with da'wah? I don't understand really. How does it connected with da'wah? In my point of view, it is not connected at all, because it just come to make the Muslims' life in the West easier, that they can buy home for themselves, that it could be comfortable for themselves, and they can live in a normal life. And how does it connected with da'wah? I'm surprised it doesn't connect. I want to tell you that sometimes when you are when you are doing something and you want the others to accept your idea, you are saying something that they like. I think that the Muslim scholars, they mentioned the principle of da'wah in that case, just in order to say to the others that they will make a hard debate with them why they let Muslims be involved with interest. So they will tell him, okay, we just do it in order to spread Islam. This is just a kind of answer to that people who will be against them. And in fact, these kinds of fatwa makes a lot of debating between Muslim scholars that belong to different streams. Someone says, okay, we will get a time that you will allow for Muslims to drink alcohol because it is in the benefit of them. You will get time that you will allow make a sexual relations between Muslims without marriage because it is in the benefit of them. So you can allow everything. To have an answer for these kind of objections and questions, they say, look, we allowed mortgages with interest in order to spread Islam. So no one can be against spreading Islam. So it's just kind of justification of this fatwa. In fact, this fatwa and the others come to make the Muslims' life in the West easier and to make harmony between the circumstances, the situation of the life and the rules of the Sharia.
But Iyad, what you're saying with this is that Sheikh Halawa is a liar.
No, I don't say
Exactly.
that. I
You're
say
saying it's a trick.
It is kind of justification, and it is known everywhere. We know for example, in the Jewish law that we know that there are sometimes that they're doing something in order to حيل تحبلات. We know it.
That's a trick. Tahbula is a trick. Okay.
Yes.
So it's a trick.
We know it in the Jewish law that they have trick in order to allow.
Devices. A nice term.
Okay, devices. Thank you, Professor Layish. So it is known in the different religions. It is known. It's accepted by scholars from different religions. So that's what's going.
But I must add something, just very brief. There is a historical context to this. And we don't have time to elaborate, but since the Reconquista, you have, especially in the Shafi school, Shafi mazhab, you have this idea that it is permissible to live in the West to the extent that you can advance and spread Islam. That's number one. And number two, I think splitting hairs about all this chicken and egg question. Is this just a mechanism to allow the facilitation, or is the facilitation a mechanism to spread Islam? Is something that is Orientalism. You use the word Oriental. That is Orientalism. Because the truth is, both are correct. These people are sincere about Taysir, and they are sincere about spreading Islam. I wouldn't doubt Qaradawi's sincerity that he wants Islam to spread. Why is it so difficult for you to admit it?
It is a very natural thing for a Muslim.
Of course,
to be
for any Muslim.
interested in spreading Islam.
It is okay. I'm not against spreading Islam, but I think this is Orientalist approach.
Why?
To understand
Why?
Muslim minority jurisprudence as
Why
a
is it
way of
Orientalist?
spreading Islam. I think
Why is it
this because you say that this kind of jurisprudence is not real.
No, I read what they say and I interpret it. And you're saying those Muslims are liars. They're not saying the truth. That's Orientalism.
We want just to show the others that it could be harmony between Muslims and non-Muslims.
Orientalism is to tell Muslims what they think. I read the text and I say what's there. You're reading and they say, well, they don't really mean it. You are the Orientalist.
I'm afraid I'm at the crossfire.
Absolutely.
Professor Malik, please.
Well, thanks very much. That's pretty exciting. You have, on the one hand, a sort of an elitist discourse that you elaborated on, and then you have things happening on the ground. Most Muslims have no idea about Fiqh al-aqalliyyat, which in fact is right. So I was wondering, first of all, it seems to be sort of new minorities, new Muslim minorities, recently kind of migrated to the West and so on, who developed this sort of Islamizing discourse. Again, this is an instance of the Islamization of the Muslims abroad. But the question would be, and Uriya, you just mentioned briefly where the Wasatis come from. You mentioned Azaris. So I can imagine that, they somehow know something about Islamic legal culture and, have gone through a particular education and so on. What about the Salafis? As far as I know, they have no idea about fiqh, right? They go directly to the Quranic text and maybe the Sunnah, and would therefore kind of, ignore the whole legal discourse that developed in the Muslim context. So could you shed some light on where these Salafis actually come from? This is one. And the second one, could you also Iyad, give some idea about the impact of both camps? Is the Wasatiyya more popular among the Muslims, or are the Salafis more, Thanks.
So, I have to first say, because I spent last summer with the Salafis, many of them in England and in Germany, many of them have some religious higher education, whether it was Mecca or Medina, in Saudi Arabia. And some of them are students of people who had such education in Saudi Arabia. But it always, if you follow the money, it always ends in Saudi Arabia at some point. Now, the Imams, I have to say, some have very impressive libraries. You would have envied their libraries. I mean, they're very nice in terms of in terms of religious law, not in terms of other things. But there are distinguished libraries, I have to say, of Islamic law, and some of them are well versed in the law. They're not, but there is the image. If you think of the Bach from Leipzig, who is like the media clown for German press whenever they want the sort of the Salafi to speak.
What is his name?
Ahmed Dabach is his name, I think. He's a Syrian Palestinian. Yes. And when I spoke with him, I had the impression that I'm speaking with a very, help me with the diplomatic word, with a very average person, let's say. He's not someone who sort of wakes up in the morning to engage in intellectual deliberations. Now, who is more popular? That is very easy to answer, because the Salafis themselves would provide a similar answer. Maybe 1% of Muslim Europeans are Salafis. maybe 1%. And the majority, even if they don't think of themselves as such, are wasatis. What's very interesting is if you go around bookstores, including in mosques which are wasati-oriented, the vast majority of publications are Salafi, because the Salafis have a lot of money. And the wasatis, and they admit it, they don't have money. So the publications of the European Council, the only place where we could find them, and we came back with, with suitcases, is the European Council. It's not spread.
Well, I think you remember, Iyad, the Fiqh al-Jihad by Qaradawi, it is full of da'wah. He speaks of da'wah not as a justification of anything, just per se. So you can't deny it, and I think there's no contradiction. They want to solve problems for Muslims in the West, but they also want to spread Islam. It's not, there is no contradiction here. And they say it expressly. Qaradawi speaks of it all the time, not as the justification of anything.
I don't ignore that it is one of the principles of Islam is to make da'wah. You can make da'wah directly by talking to people and try to convince them to convert to Islam, and you can make da'wah by being a good example for the others, that they will find that it is in their benefit to follow you and to behave such as you and to believe such as you. So, but the Muslim minority jurisprudence, how it was developed, you can look in the beginning of this approach, this doctrine. It was developed by questions that the Muslims offered and forwarded to the scholars in the Middle East, and they asked what I supposed to do in that specific situation. Should I work in a restaurant that they offer alcohol? Should I eat in a restaurant that they bringing in their menu pork? Should I have good relations with my neighbor who is not Muslim? So it begins as a question that the people ask how to practice their religion in that specific situation, and that scholars try dealing with these questions and try to supply for them rules that suits their specific situation. And that by these questions and by these needs, the doctrine was developed. I want to tell you that the later, when the doctrine was known as a famous doctrine and was best well in the West and in the East also, in the Middle East I mean, then people face objections from the Muslims in the East. What are you telling for that people, Muslims in the West? You are making bad for Islam when you are making the rules flexible and easier for them. So how they will justify this thing? By saying, okay, we are doing that in order to make da'wah is something famous and calling others to the Islam. So they justify. I want to tell you, I know it directly from the text, but I understand it when I was interview these scholars of the Muslim minority jurisprudence. That is just a justification. I think it is important to make da'wah in the from the Islamic approach, or from the Islamic idea. But in fact, the Muslim minority jurisprudence doesn't based only in da'wah. I think that da'wah is byproduct of the process.
Please.
It's just a point of detail to Dr. Shari about your example, which I very much like, about the football, about the Algerian football. Supposing, which is not necessarily true, supposing they all play in Algeria, not in France and Germany and so on. They come from Algeria, they go to the game, and then they go back to Algeria. So in that case, thank you. In that case, I don't quite see that this were an example of fiqh al-aqalliyyat. You might argue this is a kind of concession or rukhsa, which is of course a well-known. So I'm not quite sure, just in this particular example, that it necessarily
but these were German Muslim players who raised the question. Of course, if you are a player for Bnei Sakhnin, for example, and they fast, by the way.
Thank you.
I would like to take advantage of my statutory position as the chairman of this session and to pose a long question which may be addressed to both discussions. Some of the innovations introduced by the varsities with a view to facilitating the integration of Muslims into the host countries can hardly be reconciled with Islamic law. Moreover, in my view, they actually apply departure from Islamic law. Now, it is true that they use various mechanisms in order to justify this trend, such as maslaha, darura, siyasha shari'a, the maqasid sharia, and so on and so forth. Now, I wonder whether this mechanism can really legitimize such innovations, or rather are we dealing with the ideology designed to facilitate the integration? I am referring to innovations such as marriages between female converts and non-Muslim husbands, serving in military forces that fight against Muslims.
But that's continuation of marriages.
Well, this is diversity. I would say that the Salafis alternative, if it was to my judgment to decide, to my discretion, I would say the Salafis alternative seems to be much closer to Islam. If you'd like to...
Yeah, well, I think Iyad represents Islam in a more sincere way, but nevertheless, I'll say that. And that's a difference, by the way, because for me, this is a nice intellectual game. And for Iyad, this is God's word. And that makes a huge difference from the emotional point of view on how to regard it. I had a student who came to me last week, it was the end of the semester, and he said, after we learned all these things, you know, following this class, I lost all of my respects to all religions. Because I learned that religion is really, you play with words, and you end up with any result you want. I'm saying that's one way to look at it, and obviously, if that's the way you look at it, then you are a very qualified Salafi. But I think there is another way to look at it, which is here we have people who somehow find a way, who manage to remain religious, somehow within the boundaries of Sharia. And I remember there was a wonderful moment he had, if you remember 3 years ago, there was a conference, and someone raised a hand and asked you, tell me, Qadi, isn't there a simpler way, rather than use all those mechanisms, maslaha and fiqh al-muzzanat, so forth, can't you just renounce Islam? That would solve all the problems. And you answered him very nicely. You said, that's important for me. I believe this is God's word. And what I try to do is maintain my faith and engage with modernity. And the only way for me to do that is like that. So, I mean, why be a Salafi?
I think I know Professor Layish many years ago, and I know your approach about the developing of the Sharia, that Sharia could be only developed by the jurists, the ancient jurists, and I think that the new the Sharia in the modern times, it is also legitimacy exactly such as the rules that were derived by the ancient scholars, exactly the same. We know that they were, that ancient scholars, they were people such as us, exact such as me. They didn't get anything from Allah. They didn't know anything more than I know. And there are people such as me that live in their specific situation at that time. And I'm living in different situation in my time. And I think that this...
But they had legal authority. I mean, not everyone can come forward and suggest suggestion.
But Al-Ghazali is the one who suggested maslaha. That's the 11th century.
Yes.
So,
and Ibn Taymiyyah started talking about also maslaha, and Ibn Taymiyyah talks about, and the Shatibi, that he is one of the very known ancient scholars of the Islam, and he talked about the objectives of the Sharia, and other Muslim scholars that they are known and they are accepted as leaders of the Islam in their time. But also, I think that also we are the Muslims in our generation, that we face different challenges that the ancient faced in their time. We should use the instruments of the Sharia, the mechanism of the Sharia, in order to apply the Sharia in the right way in our specific situation. We can't freeze the Sharia as it is in the 10th century, and we will say this is the Islam. No, Islam is something dynamic. And we know that the say of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he sent one of his people to Yemen, and he told him, how will you make justice in Yemen? And he said, according to what was said, what was in the Quran. And he asked him, if you don't find, so in the say of the Prophet, in the Sunnah of the Prophet, and if you don't find, I will make efforts in order to find the solution, and I will educate people according to that. This is and Prophet Muhammad say, it is good and it's correct to do that, and I think it is a permission to every Muslim scholar to try to find the correct solution, the Islamic solution for any challenge that we face everywhere, every time. And I think if we don't do that, we will miss the Islam. Because Islam will not suit our specific situation.
My question, and also it is a commented question to Dr. Shavit, but Dr. Zahalka also can answer it. You divide the opinion of the preachers or the fatwas to two groups, Wasatiyya and Salafiyya. And I would like to ask you, you didn't find different persons who said that they are belonging to the Wasatiyya, but they have different opinions. For instance, Qardawi, you mention it as belong to Wasatiyya. He said himself that Wasatiyya, but as I follow his preaches, not all his fatwas, but his preaches in the mosque of Doha in Qatar, that he is, most of them, they are extremist preachers. Concerning the Salafiyya, they are not exactly the same. They supposed to be differences. Maybe you find differences between their opinions. For instance, the Salafiyya in Egypt, they are more moderate than Salafiyya in Libya. After Gaddafi was deposed, the Salafiyya in Libya, they said that according to their belief, they have to destroy all mosques in which there are buried sheikhs. And they destroy at least 10 mosques where there was their sheikhs. While the Salafiyya of Egypt, they were against that. They said it is against the Islamic religion. Thank you. Another point concerning the Shia. The Shia, they are not considering themselves nor Salafiyya nor Wasatiyya. Would you comment about that? Thank you.
I believe we end end the session. And I want to thank the lecturer for the most interesting presentation and for the discussion here.